Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. We were just setting up in the background, but now we're going to start our webinar. I'm Kelvin from IITPSA, and we have our guest who's going to do the presentation for us. IITPSA, in collaboration with our SIGCyber special interest group, they will introduce themselves. Thank you. Over to you, Dave and Andrew and Prof. K.
Perfect. Thank you, Calvin. Apologies, we're having a few technical issues there. Can you believe it? There was probably about 70 or 80 years worth of experience there in the background trying to arrange to present slides. But anyway, here we are, and thank you very much for joining this evening. Andrew will do his introductions in a few minutes. I'll just talk through the format of the event. So just a few housekeeping bits and pieces. If you want to write anything, ask questions, then there is going to be 15-20 minutes at the end, and you can put your questions in the group chat so we can all see. We'll spend about 5 minutes doing the introductions, and then Andrew will start the main topics of the presentation. So we'll be continuing our theme that we've been going over the webinars, the past 2 webinars this year. So we'll be looking at third-party risk management. Andrew will be presenting recent prominent breaches and a sort of war story style. We'll be looking at threat actor access vectors, and then Andrew will highlight the practical risk mitigation strategies. Part of our goal is to make the cybersecurity topics accessible, understandable, and available to you guys. I'm just going to talk for about half an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So with no further ado, welcome, Andrew.
Dave, thank you very much. Just want to make sure audio is working.
Yes. All
excellent.
Good.
Last. Brilliant. So apologies, guys. I'll take the full blame for being a little bit delayed in our start. But I'm pleased to say I finally managed to work my browser, and we seem to be on the roll now. So, folks, real pleasure to be here this evening. I'm coming to you live from Johannesburg. It's a lot warmer here than Cape Town, if I can tell you that from the outset. There's no air conditioning in this room, and I feel like I'm under the lights. But hopefully this will be a fun session to kind of go through some of our experiences around third-party risk. As Dave said, please, guys, let's keep this interactive. Please do drop any questions in the chat. We've got some cool stuff to throw out at you, during the course of the presentation. So going on to the next slide. So just a quick bit about me. I'm not going to labor this point. My name's Andrew Henwood. I've been in cybersecurity for almost 30 years, and I still can't work a browser, but enough of those jokes now. I've been involved in cybersecurity literally from the outset of me joining the corporate world. I actually am born and bred in Johannesburg, spent a number of years, actually 13, 14 years in London, and then returned to South Africa around 2013. I've got a deep background in the payment industry, something that's many of you may well know or have heard about, the PCI-DSS. It may well be a swear word to some of you in this space, but it's a solid standard. It's pretty technical. It goes into a lot of detail about what you should be doing if you're handling cardholder data. And actually, this is where I had the privilege of meeting Dave in helping a number of call centers achieve PCI-DSS compliance and thereby becoming a lot more secure. I'd say of those 30 years, probably really pertinent to this entire presentation, for 24 of those years, I've been involved deeply in digital forensics and instant response. And I think that's really helped me get a sense from the coalface of what the bad guys are doing and helping to translate that into practical things that you guys can take away to mitigate risk, to hopefully not become one of those folks I speak to who suffered a breach when my team or myself get involved in performing a digital forensics or instant response investigation. So hopefully I'll be imparting some of that practical information during the course of the presentation. A little bit about Black Rhino and actually Certra. So Black Rhino, we're a cybersecurity consultancy. As I mentioned, we do incident response and forensics, and we do a lot of third-party risk management. And you'll see how that ties together in a short while. And born out of the incident response and digital forensics, you will see I'm going to talk a lot about business email compromises. So I hate to say this is a very prevalent threat. And out of that, we've birthed a new sister company called Certra that really works to protect payments, both payments you make as a business, payments that your clients may make to you, and it also protects against impersonation. Moving on to one thing that's very dear to my heart, at Black Rhino, we're a socially conscious business. We're a very proud member of something called 1% for the Planet. So this was founded by the good folks at Patagonia. So some of you might know the outdoorsy brand called Patagonia. They started this philanthropic organization where they encourage organizations like us to donate 1% of our revenue to planetary and good causes. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years, and we've got some great charities that we support. I'm an avid water sports lover and climber of small hills that David and I share an interest in. And I'm very keen to make sure that my kids can experience the great outdoorsy type stuff I do, and hence our commitment to do good things for the planet. So at this point, I'm going to ask you all to pause. And I ask this question quite often. I'll be honest, it does work quite better in a live scenario where I can see folks in front of me. But I'm going to spin this question around, and I'm going to ask: is there anyone in the audience that has not suffered an attempted scam or an impersonation attempt, or has not heard of a colleague or a friend who has been subjected to some sort of cybersecurity incident, possibly losing money? I would usually ask the inverse and say, put your hands up if you know or if you've experienced something like this yourself. And dare I say that most people in the room will put their hands up. But it'll be interesting to see. Just put your name down if you've never experienced any kind of cyber incident, scam, or know of someone who's lost money. I can't see the chat right now. We'll have a look at that at the end of the session to unpack that.
I can see it, Andrew, by the way, so I can relay anything
Perfect.
that's being written.
Excellent. Well, Dave, I'll hazard a guess that I don't know how many people we've got in attendance, but I'm gonna guess that the minority is folks who've not suffered any type of incident. And I think this is going to be reflected in the stats that I start taking you through in a short while. But is that kind of what you're seeing there, Dave?
Yes, nobody is commenting at the moment. And how interesting, and what a sign of the times, Andrew, to be asking the question that way around, because 10 years ago, you would have been asking the other way, right? Because it
Absolutely.
would have been the exception for somebody to have been or known of a threat or been part of. Yeah.
Absolutely,
so
Dave. Couldn't agree more.
So there's no responses, Andrew, to your question, which, is also a real indication of how prevalent the modern day threat landscape is. Absolutely.
The times have definitely changed, Dave. I remember 10, 15 years ago, it was a real chore to try and convince boards to invest in cybersecurity. I'm actually up in Joburg. I've just finished a meeting with a large law firm who are being inundated with boards requesting assistance in performing incident response simulations. So, mentality is changing. The times are changing, as they say, and cyber risk is very much firmly on the agenda.
Okay. No responses.
Perfect.
So
no responses.
Okay.
Perfect. Great. Just one quick question, Dave. I see animations are not working on the slide deck. Is there a way to get animations working, or Just wondering.
I would have to work on it in the background, Andrew. Just at the moment, assume it's not going to work. So talk us through it.
That's no problem. Don't worry. Luckily, I remember the slides. I put them together. It wasn't some AI bot that I threw everything at. So guys, really, at this point, I'm going to be talking about a couple of the big headline issues that many of you guys know about. And I promise you, behind that picture that's on the screen at the moment is an unfortunate picture of Jaguar Land Rover. I'm sure if any of you guys have seen the news recently, in the last month, Jaguar Land Rover was hit by a significant ransomware event. Their systems were completely shut down. Literally, production of cars in the UK stopped. And in an unprecedented move, the UK government has actually stepped in to support or offer assistance, financial support and backing to Jaguar Land Rover and their supply chain to really mitigate the effect of what's actually happening. Very personally, not sure this is a great move by the UK government. I applaud the fact that they have the ability to kind of offer that support. What I'm more worried about is that this may well set a precedent for any other big cyber incidents, because look, Jaguar Land Rover are part of a much bigger group, and I've not actually seen much from them as to how they are committing to kind of get things back on track and what they're investing to restore this. This is not just an issue in the UK. So we've actually done a bunch of work here in South Africa where Jaguar Land Rover dealers are suffering because of this, because literally they cannot order new cars, they cannot order parts because those systems are offline at the moment. That's a pretty big issue if that's your business. The next picture, which you can see right in front of you at the moment, this one hit me deep inside the heart. I'm a beer lover. I'm a big beer lover. And, how dare these ransomware threat actors attack Asahi, which is a Japanese beer that I'm very fond of. Entire production of the Asahi beer production line was halted. Ransomware threat actors perpetrated the crime, tried to extort them. Production has resumed, so lovers of Asahi, don't worry. Beer is continuing to flow, but these are, without being flippant, these are pretty major, significant issues, hitting the global headlines. So this is not a small issue that's on the back pages of the Sunday Times. These are hitting kind of headline news. This slide, I'm going to pull on, and I'm going to, full disclosure, we're a reseller of a platform called Black Kite, which does a lot of work around third-party risk. And I'll happily share after the session. We'll get this communication out to you. There's a list behind the image on the top here, which details all of the latest third-party breaches that have occurred where the entity has suffered an incident, and that has been caused by a third-party solution, which they are incorporating within their operations. And one of the biggest issues, and what I would show you if my animations were working, is in September, the sales loft or sales drift vulnerability, which affected Salesforce instances, hit a multitude of companies during September. And crazily enough, a number of those organizations are actually cybersecurity businesses, major cybersecurity businesses. So I'm talking folks like Qualys, Tanium.
Cloudflare is on there as well.
Cloudflare was affected. Palo Alto, which is one of the largest cybersecurity hardware and solution providers in the world. Zscaler. These are prominent names. And, the real message I'll give to you here is that, in the old days, I would flippantly say, do the things right and hopefully you won't suffer a breach. These days, because of the multitude of third parties that organizations use, invariably your number is going to come up, even if you are a cybersecurity vendor. And I'm not saying that we can mitigate all the risk, but we need to be prepared. We need to practice. We need to know how to respond. And the hope is, and I certainly did see that in the responses that a lot of these vendors put out on their websites. A lot of these guys posted very detailed breakdowns of their actual incident response processes when the SalesLoft drift Salesforce breach came to the fore. So lots of bad stuff happening out there, a lot of third parties being breached, and because a lot of these third parties are used by many companies, the sort of the impact is quite vast out there, and the exposure is quite prolific. So I stole this slide from our last session. If any of you guys were in our last, part one of our third-party risk session, the joke here, without being flippant, is, folks out there, if you ask them how as a vendor are you doing from a cybersecurity perspective, most vendors are going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to say, "Yep, I'm doing well." So I'm sure many of you on this call, if you do work with larger organizations, you would have been hit with these invariable cybersecurity questionnaires. These cybersecurity questionnaires are the bane of many organizations' existence. They're a necessary evil. The unfortunate reality is that most vendors, they lie in those responses. Well, maybe lie is a bit of a strong word. They embellish the truth. And unfortunately, that gives everyone a false sense of security. If I send out a questionnaire to all of my vendors and they all come back with an A+, top-notch answers in every single response, is that reflective of reality? I'll hazard a guess, and I know for a fact that is not the case. And that is why we've got to be more empirical. We've got to be more evidentiary-based when we go and seek out confirmation from our vendors that they're doing what they should be doing. Because remember, it's a very cliched saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you can have the best security, you can have the most compliance certificates for your organization, but if one of your vendors lets you down and isn't doing what they should be doing, that can be the ingress vector that causes you a big issue. And switching gear a bit now, I want to talk a little bit about about some typical environments that you guys may well be well versed with. You may have visited. So there's a couple of pictures of some call centers set up here. I know, Dave, you are well versed in this space, and I'm sure many of the folks on the session will be aware of these types of environments, typical call center type environments. I know some of these images are pretty small, and the astute of you may have noticed something. You may have noticed that in one of these pictures, there's a guy lying on the ground, sitting in that call center. And some of the other slides that are behind these images actually demonstrate some evidence. In fact, let me go back a slide here. If you look on the top right, you can see some numbers, some yellow numbers on the desks. Those are evidence numbers. My particular favorite is the bottom right. You can see a picture. I know it's very small, but there's a picture of what looks like some mob characters playing poker. And you won't believe it. These are actual screenshots of organized criminal syndicates perpetrating attacks against Western businesses. And this was part of an Interpol sting operation called Operation Pandora. And these are actual crime scenes of the Interpol and the associated local law enforcement entities seizing, securing the crime scene, seizing evidence, and bringing these folks to justice. And the real message here, and let me jump onto my next slide, is to really indicate that folks, gone are the days, is it a, kind of one or two script kiddies, exploiting a single bug to make a little bit of money. What's happening now is it's organized criminals, it's syndicates, it's highly skilled individuals forming coalitions with fellow hacking syndicates to perpetrate large crimes to make significant funds of money, to cyber extort, or to even perform business email compromises, which is a real scourge on society these days. We'll talk a lot more about that in a short while. So just in terms of the scale of cybercrime, there's some statistics that have been touted out there over the last couple of years. And if you look at this very carefully, if you look in 2024, because we're not kind of finished 2025 yet, but the estimate was in 2024 that $9.22 trillion was going to be, or was the cost of cybercrime across the globe. This is an astronomical number. It's so big that, this represents 1.5% of the global GDP of the planet. 1.5%. And I don't know if many people know this, but this $9.22 trillion, this is actually bigger than all of the illicit drug trades combined. That's how much cybercrime is actually costing the globe right now. And this is projected to increase. And I know it's very small there, and I can only just see it, but I think it's around $13 trillion projected for, I think that's 2028, it looks like over there. So, the economic impact on this is significant, and hence the call to action to invest more in cybersecurity. The scale of cybercrime is off the charts, and that talks to what we mentioned earlier, Dave. I think there is a growing awareness at a board level that we all need to do something, and we need to do it fast. MasterCard, in March of 2025 this year, they actually came out with this alarming statistic. They researched, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 3,500 SME businesses. And they indicated that 1 in 5 of these SMEs, if they suffered a cyber attack, 18% of them subsequently filed for bankruptcy, or they closed their doors. And I can honestly say from our perspective, we're not quite at that level. Remember, the incident response and forensics that we do, a lot of the work we do comes from, we're on a panel of a number of cyber insurers. So we get called in when folks have got cyber insurance. So luckily they have an element of protection when they've been subjected to a cyber attack. I can tell you of the majority of the cases we've investigated, we've not seen a 1 in 5 folks closing their door. But I can tell you one thing is I think our statistic would have been a bit higher if these folks did not have cyber insurance. They certainly would not have survived the severity of the attacks or known how to handle that, the issue itself. Additionally, some more recent stats in October of this year, 70% of global consumers agree that it is harder to secure their information on digital platforms than it is to secure their physical home. And I think to our point earlier, yes, awareness is rising, but dare I say it's not necessarily getting easier. The sophistication of the attacks are increasing. Remember, the bad guys don't stay static. They are continually looking for new ways to circumvent your defenses, and we are truly being kept on our toes. And this is a non-trivial matter to work on. And to my previous question earlier, you can see the survey that MasterCard conducted. 80% of global consumers have received at least one scam attempt in the last year. That's a pretty significant number. And reflecting what we said earlier, 75% of the consumers out there say they're more concerned about cybersecurity than they were a year ago. Again, reflecting what we talked about earlier. So now looking at some of the stats that we seeing in our caseloads. Now, folks, I do want to stress this is our lens on the digital forensics and incident response cases that we're working. We predominantly do work in the UK and Southern Africa. So this is our perspective. There are a number of other players out there. So take these statistics with a pinch of salt, but they still do illustrate some very interesting things, which we'll talk to in more detail shortly. So if we lump all of our casework besides business email compromises, that accounts for 46% of our work. If we look specifically at business email compromise, and a business email compromise is really where an entity, a business, has one or more of their email addresses, email accounts compromised, largely due to the proliferation of things like Office 365 and Google Workspace, where one of your inboxes gets compromised, and the bad guys then utilize the information obtained within the inbox to perpetrate often what we call authorized push payment fraud. So this is what we mean by this is the bad guys break into your inbox or your client's inbox and they modify invoices and they try and solicit payments. And there's many ways this can be perpetrated, but business email compromise is more than half of the caseloads that we're seeing right now. I'll talk a lot more about this in a short while. Dave, you had a question there?
Just jumping in. So I'm assuming that the majority of small to very large enterprises are using Office 365 or Exchange Online as the platform for email, right? And
correct.
Two-factor authentication comes with every bundle of Office licenses. So why don't people just turn it on? Because surely by instantly enabling two-factor authentication, you are adding considerably more of a safety net against email compromise, right?
Yes, a great comment, and I'm love you went down this route, Dave. So, 3 to 4 years ago, I would say to you, and I was the guy running around flying the flag for ensuring that if I speak to anyone, my family, my friends, my customers, any opportunity I got, please, whatever you do, invoke two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. It's like you have to do it. The problem is, Dave, times have changed. And look, if you haven't done multi-factor authentication, you've got a problem. But the bigger problem we have now is that the attackers are now perpetrating attacks, phishing type attacks that relay the multi-factor authentication. So what you now need to do is strong recommendation is now to implement phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. It's no longer good enough. And look, I want to ensure we've got to be careful here. So for you, anyone in the audience, please, if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, please, that's my biggest takeaway. And you'll see this isn't my takeaways right at the end. Please implement multi-factor authentication. If you really want to do it properly, and you should be doing it properly nowadays, implement multi-factor authentication that is phishing resistant. And there's a specific term. You look for something called FIDO2 compliant multi-factor authentication. And the good news is it's not super difficult. There are ways to do it. Go and research this with Office 365. And this is the next step that we need to be implementing. And Dave, you'd be amazed. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said. We still find, in fact, many of the cases we walk into, the guys have implemented multi-factor authentication, but they haven't done it for the lead developer because he decided he was special and he didn't need it and he wanted a quick way to get into the platform. Or they created an exception for the CEO because he works from his home in Mauritius. And that's where the threat actors get in because that's the one account that's not configured for multi-factor authentication. So again, I want to put this in perspective again. Let me be very clear. The creme de la creme, the advice nowadays is phishing resistant MFA. That's what you should be doing. But more importantly, make sure you've at least got multi-factor authentication on every remote account that you possibly have accessing sensitive client information.
Thanks, Andrew. It's an important point, like you say, to have this implemented pervasively, because arguably the people who are saying no are the people who are going to get potentially the biggest targets, right?
Absolutely. That's completely agree. And remember, because of the proliferation of Office 365, and I'm not picking on Microsoft here, but it is trivial to try, let me do a dark web search for this username. if it comes up and I've got their corporate username, the email address, I'll go and try that password I've tried on the dark web, from the dark web, should I say, and I'll test it on an Office 365, login page. And I'll tell very quickly if they've got multi-factor authentication enabled. So it's so trivial to for the bad guys to test this. Yes, of course, you should have impossible travel detection. You should be watching your logs very carefully. That, Dave is in Johannesburg, right now. Why on earth is he logging in from Poland, 3 minutes later successfully? Those are the kinds of things that you should absolutely be monitoring in real time on your Office 365 or Google environment. Good.
Thanks.
All right. The third stat down there, mean time to detect. I'm going to quickly just talk about this one. Mean time to detect. This is the time when we go into a forensic investigation. We try and determine when did the attackers break into the environment. So obviously, if we've been invoked to perform a forensic investigation of an incident being detected, there's a window of compromise that the bad guys have been in that environment. And we call this another name for this is the dwell time. And what's interesting here, you can see it's not a good statistic. 46 days is the average dwell time across all of our cases. So that means that the threat actors have been sitting in the environment for, it's about a month and a half before they got detected. And this is not a great statistic. This is something that people should be detecting. Absolutely. We should be detecting this far, far quicker. That is the average dwell time. That is the mean time to detect. The mean time to contain is also pretty interesting. So you can see 38 days. So this is from when we get in, we provide advice, we provide some strong recommendations, and it still takes some organizations, the mean is 38 days. Now, I'm going to heavily caveat that, and you can see the median time to contain is 2 days. And our statistics are horribly skewed because you wouldn't believe it. We have had one customer who would not believe that they'd been compromised. We provided all the evidence, and they refused to believe that they actually had been compromised. So they chose not to follow the recommendations we put in play. So unfortunately, that horribly skews our stats, and that's why the mean time to contain is 38 days. But when we take a median and we get rid of the outliers, you can see most folks, once we've informed them that they've been compromised, 2 days to implement the remediation. The guys are jumping. They're moving quickly once we've been invoked. So that is actually a positive statistic if you get rid of the outliers. So good message here. Folks, when we do get engaged, when boards or organizations do appreciate the gravity of the situation, they're moving pretty quickly to remediate, which is great. Moving on to the next one. So back in September the 11th, 2024, the FBI, through something called the IC3 reporting page, they put out this public announcement around business email compromises. And what IC3 is it's a facility that anyone who suffers an incident on the internet can lodge the details of the incident and the loss that they suffered. And IC3 pushes out these frequent reports on incidents, on cyber incidents, cyber attacks, alerts, all kinds of good stuff. And they put together this alert. And I'm going to ask, please, if anyone's on the chat, do not go and search for this, because I'm going to throw out a little prize for folks out there. I want you folks to guess. You can see there's a gray box there. I want you to guess in Rand terms what the total loss of reported business email compromises, what is the total financial loss over the last 10 years from October 2013 to December 2023. That's 10 years duration of business email compromises. This is reported loss. This is not estimated loss. I want you folks, good folks out there, put in the comments, Dave, I want you to adjudicate.
Yeah.
I want you to let guys take a guess of what their rand value of the total reported loss is for business email compromise for those 10 years. And the prize I'm willing to throw into the mix here, I mentioned we were a reseller of Black Kite. We're going to offer 3 months worth of Black Kite monitoring on a domain of your choice. The value of that is just around 10,000 Rand. And that will be to the person who guesses the closest Rand value for business email compromises loss over the last 10 years. Don't tell me now, Dave. We'll have a look at the end.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got people already answering.
Great. And if you get too close, then I know you've looked it up. So please, no cheating, guys. All right. So business email compromise is a massive problem. And what is very interesting here in our stats, as I said, in my previous section, business email compromises, they are more than half of our casework. And what is super interesting is when we get invoked to come in and do a forensics, the majority of the business email compromises we walk into, 81% of the clients we come and investigate, they have suffered a breach on their email that they were not aware of, or they may have suspected they had an issue, but they weren't aware of the extent of that issue. So the issue was on their side. 19% of these cases involved the other party, the third party, suffering the incident. So remember, a business email compromise is an inbox has been hacked, and there's generally been a manipulation of a payment, and a payment has been made. So whether an invoice was modified and banking details were configured to go to the fraudster, one of the big things we have to try and work out is where is the compromise? Is it on the first party, the person who's contracted us, or is the compromise of the inbox on the other side? And you can see here what's quite interesting is, and quite surprising, is that in many cases, even those folks with cyber insurance, when we walk in the door, they do not realize that their inboxes have been compromised. So that's an important point to take away here. And in 100% of the cases we've investigated, the credentials, and as I say, remember, there is now, there are phishing attacks which are that they can circumvent ordinary MFA, they relay the MFA. In our analysis, 100% of the cases, credentials have been stolen, which have led to the first or third party breach. And that has been stolen credentials, either through a phishing type attack or some sort of dark web analysis, some sort of internet scraper has picked up the issues and dumped the credentials. So guys, I hate to say that, being the bearer of bad news, we're walking a tightrope here. The bad guys are sophisticated, they are advancing all the time, they've got a lot of time on their hands, they are sophisticated, they are working together in groups, they are organized, and we are walking this tightrope of trying to do as much as we can to mitigate risk. And I've always said, cybersecurity is a balancing act. You need to weigh up your investment to do enough to stay as secure as possible. But obviously, we get the understanding that just like there's a seesaw, there's a balancing act too. You don't overinvest because it does affect the bottom line. So it is a challenge, and I'm not gonna steer away from that. There is a very big challenge in ensuring that we are investing just enough to stay ahead of the bad guys. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom. And this balancing act is a non-trivial exercise. So in terms of some war stories, and I do apologize, I've got a bunch of war stories written up in my notes here, which I can't see right now, but I'm going to go on memory from some of these war stories that my team have pulled together for me. But to give you a little indication, we got called into a case not so long ago where the client was seeing through their proxy strange traffic. So this organization developed their own software. So the software was being used in their environment. They were developing it in-house. And for some reason in the production code, the production environment was calling home. Well, it was calling an address in China. And the guys couldn't work out why and what part of the code was actually doing this. And we got invoked to kind of come to site and start, working out what was going on. And through a process of elimination, through a traffic analysis, through identifying the processes that were being involved, that were invoking that traffic, through to the addresses in China, through to obtaining source code, working out what had been compiled, we actually worked backwards to identify that a particular developer had a significant module in their code that he couldn't get his head around how to do it properly. And unfortunately, what he did is he posted to a public forum asking for assistance in how to get around this trickiness that had been identified. And in this particular situation, a very helpful individual on the forum had offered to code up this portion of the module and had provided the code. And unfortunately, what the developer, the in-house developer, didn't realize is there was latent backdoor code inserted in a binary format. It was base64 encoded, and it wasn't easily discernible. And that code was compiled into the production source code and compiled into the environment and was running in live production. And through an external invocation of this interface that was publicly accessible, this latent code was invoked, and the threat actors were able to start initiating a command and control center, which allowed them to backdoor into the client environment. And the lesson learned here, I mean, obviously the developer didn't get off lightly. They didn't really appreciate, the extent of the dangers of copying code from the internet. They thought this individual was being extremely helpful, but it really goes to prove a point that, you can't blindly trust code that you're copying from the internet. Even if someone is extremely helpful, be very wary of anything that gets inserted into your production libraries. Extending on that, a huge piece of work is starting to occur in the US around software bill of materials. So more and more large organizations are requiring their third parties or their suppliers to report on software bill of materials. What code is being utilized in providing the services that you provide to me? So really look out for this thing, software bill of materials. We call it an SBOM, is becoming more and more important. And if you're in the business of providing services to large organizations, especially in the US, you're going to see a lot more work around this. A lot of this is due to things like Log4j, which was a pretty major issue that affected a number of companies globally. There's another library called NPM, which was actually backdoored, and threat actors infiltrated that code around 10 years ago. And they've slowly dropped that code into a multitude of different services that have been provided out there. And major organizations delivering solutions embed things like the NPM library and inadvertently are allowing for backdoor information to be presented into their clients' environments, which is really not a good thing. So more and more information around your entire bill of materials is going to be required when you deliver services to large organizations.
Absolutely, and thanks very much, Andrew. Have you got any more slides to go through, or should we start opening up the floor to questions?
I tell you what, I'm going to whiz through these last ones, and then
okay.
We can open it up for questions. So I'm going to whiz through this, keep it very high level. Guys, I do want to stress in any one of the cases we work on, there are, it is really and truly devastating for the victims, whether this is an individual who's lost a lot of money through a business email compromise, or the small to medium size organization that suffered a major issue. In fact, a number of the cases we've worked, unfortunately, the business owners have actually had to go for counseling, for emotional counseling. I mean, that is how devastating something like this can be when you suffer an incident. So please, folks, if you do experience one of these, please do try and be as prepared as you can. Get the support that you need from the organization, from organizations out there to kind of walk the journey with you. So in terms of the compromise vectors, guys, I'm going to stress, from a third-party perspective, well, in fact, I'm not going to talk third parties yet. How are the bad guys getting in? Guys, email is one of the biggest threat vectors you can face. Email carves through your environment like a hot knife through butter, where the bad guys phish you to obtain credentials, or they, invoke a business email compromise and then, do an authorized push payment. Email is one of the biggest threat vectors because it goes through any firewall. It's one of the best ways the bad guys can get into your environment. I always talk about the unknown unknowns. Guys, you need to be on top of your environment. You need to know what domains you have, what subdomains you use, your IP addresses. You need to know about shadow IT. What services are you guys using? Should they be allowed to use Dropbox or OneDrive within your environment? You need to understand what's going on there. And from a third party's perspective, we've talked about it. The whole, premise that we're talking here is, third parties need to do the same thing. And, I've got a nice recursive picture here. Remember, your third parties need to be conscious of all of exactly what I mentioned above too. They need to be aware of email. They need to understand how to protect themselves. They need to know how to identify the unknown unknowns. And if I quickly just go on, what do we need to do? For email, bake in security. Use Office 365, use Google. Please, guys, for heaven's sake, and I'm not picking on MWeb, but if you're using an MWeb email account for your corporate usage, or even your clients are using it, get onto a corporate email system. Dave, here's where I mentioned FIDO2 MFA, phishing resistant MFA. Have a look at this, guys. It's really a strong recommendation. For the unknown unknowns, I cannot encourage you more. Discover, do active vulnerability scans repeatedly. Do penetration tests at least once a year. If you can, continuously monitor your environment. You need to identify what's going on, understand your environment so that you can respond, you can learn from what you're identifying, and you need to do this on a continual basis. And from a third-party vendor perspective, encourage them to do the same. You need to get proactive with your third parties. Get them to monitor. If you can, help them monitor themselves on a continuous basis. You want to not be sending your third parties a huge questionnaire, 300 questions, and getting them to spend, weeks answering these questionnaires. Rather get them to proactively take action and own their security infrastructure. Because if they secure their infrastructure, it goes without saying that they're helping you secure your infrastructure because they're a critical part of your infrastructure. So from a takeaway perspective, guys, we've got to push out a culture of cybersecurity. Get your senior management involved. Work on an incident response plan. That's your IRP. Do your tabletop exercises. Guys, get your senior leadership in a room. Pretend you've suffered an incident. Practice what you will do. And if you don't have an incident response retainer, work with organizations to know who you're going to call. Many folks like us do offer zero value retainers. Get on board with the guys. Know who you're going to call if the proverbial hits the fan. From an email perspective, guys, email should be considered as blatantly insecure. Email is not a secure mechanism to send sensitive data through like bank details. If you need a more efficient way, give us a shout. We can chat to you and we can give you some more practical ideas. From a vendor perspective, third-party risk management is all about empowering your vendors. If you empower them, we see collective risk reduction. So on that note, guys, guess the FBI crime stats. So Dave, can I do the big reveal? Have people thrown in their numbers?
Let me just give you some. So we've got a whole range of values. We've got from the lowest was 135 million rand, and
cool.
the highest value quoted was 50 trillion rand. and then there's a whole host of values in between. So the range the range of answers was between 18 billion rand and 50 trillion. That's
Okay.
an enormous number.
So there we go, guys.
No.
$55 billion was officially lost, guys. I want to stress this. This is reported as lost. This is not projected numbers. $55 billion was reported lost in the last 10 years. And on the conversion rate as of last night, with a ton of caveats there, you're looking at 955 billion rand was lost globally to business email compromises over the last 10 years, which is very close to 1 trillion rand. So the closest we have to 1 trillion rand is the winner.
And that is Namanzo, I do believe. Namanzo. There you go.
Namanzo, we need to ask the question. We need to ask the question, did you look this up? I need to ensure that you're being honest here.
Let me just Nomzamo.
Let's assume Nomzamo is honest and very pleased to offer you a 3-month all expenses covered monitoring of a URL of your choice, and we'll reach out and get you details. Dave, that's it from me. I wish I was back in Cape Town. That is me in sunny Cape Town, just off my... I'm very fortunate to be living in a place called Bloberg Strand, and that's yours truly sitting on a kite. When I'm not doing cybersecurity, I love kite surfing, and that's myself on a hydrofoil. So one day I hope to see you all out in the water one day. So be safe and be secure, guys. And any questions, Dave?
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew. And we really appreciate you taking time out from your busy schedule. I know you've got a very busy a couple of days ahead of you in Johannesburg. And yeah, look, great content, Andrew. We can relate to exactly the topics. So important. I mean, it's just a massive massive collection of challenges, right? But there's a lot you can do just at a very basic level to move yourself forward a long way. So let's go to the floor. Any of you have any questions for Andrew or myself, or anything relating to any of the topics that we've discussed? And I'm actually going to ask Kelvin, so who's one of the administrators sitting in the background. Kelvin, so do we have Nomzamo's details that they would have registered with for us to get in contact with them and get their prize over to them?
Yes, we'll be able to get the details.
Okay, that's fantastic. So any questions? Lots of thank yous, lots of congratulations, Andrew, which are well founded. I'm not so sure if you can see this group chat. I'm having a quick look now,
and I'm disappointed there are no tough questions, because I was going to hand those tough questions straight to you.
Yes, that's right. And I was going to sort of disappear and say I'm having internet problems all of a sudden. Okay, Nomzamo.
If they don't want to type in the questions, do they want to speak? I can give them access. If they have access to that speaking, anyone wants to speak?
Hi, Andrew. I had a question. I already can speak. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Andrew, thanks so much for a great presentation. I know we're on time, but just a quick comment from your side in terms of the role that cyber insurers should maybe play in terms of mandating things like FIDO to the MFA. Is there a trend moving towards that kind of thing? Are we seeing more cyber insurers saying, here's the foundation that needs to be provided?
So listen, that's a great question. So look, full disclosure, we work very closely with a number of cyber insurers. And what's quite interesting is traditionally, cyber insurers have given a list of in fact, many questions and mandated requirements. And dare I say, 3 to 4 years ago, it was actually quite tough to get cyber insurance because you had to fill out this detailed sort of assessment form, which went into minute details of every aspect of your environment. And what many people felt, and we actually did a lot of work around this, consulting work, in helping people complete these questionnaires. And the problem is, once you complete the questionnaire, you kind of, a lot of entities we worked with got very nervous to submit them to the insurers to obtain the cyber insurance because they felt they weren't quite at the level of best practice that was expected of them. So the good news is things have evolved, and the cyber insurers now kind of generally break it down to kind of, I'm very generalizing now, but sort of 5 or 6 key questions. And they're not so much questions now as they're mandates. So you'll be pleased to know that the number 1 on that list is multi-factor authentication. So at the moment, it's very much one of the required mandates. And when you obtain cyber insurance, you are required to attest that you are abiding by those call them 10 commandments, if you want to call it that. Now, what is interesting is when we come in and do the forensics, we have to assess whether an organization has followed the 10 commandments. And what is super interesting for us is hats off for the cyber insurers, because we have many cases where, as I've mentioned, the CEO has not had MFA. It's everywhere except the CEO, and it was the CEO that was compromised. What's been very interesting for us is that the cyber insurers have still been paying those claims. Wow. So not that they're condoning that behavior, but they do appreciate that there are circumstances that may, the organizations tried very hard to kind of, do what they should do. Now, I don't want to talk on behalf of cyber insurers, but, you have insurance for a reason. If what we've been hearing is that if you get a red mark against every single one of the 10 commandments and you put a claim in, you're probably not going to get cover. Okay, so the cyber insurers are, moving ahead. They are updating these questionnaires. What is quite interesting is I think we're hitting a bit of a plateau where the questionnaires are becoming easier, and there's more of an acceptance that organizations should be following cybersecurity best practice, and they are doing more empirical validation. So they're saying, we will monitor you, we will offer some additional services to you to be more proactive, so that if we can detect that there's an issue, we can respond quicker, or we can mitigate your risk and possibly partner with MFA-resistant providers. So we're seeing incentives creeping into it as well on the more proactive cyber insurers out there. So look, the cyber insurers will adapt where they're paying claims, especially if those claims are creeping up. So, trust me, they're not in the business of just, willy-nilly dishing out money. They need to be profitable businesses too, and they've got the finger on the pulse, regarding where the risks are. And as I said before, MFA is right at the top of that list.
Great, thanks, Andrew. We've got 3 questions. So the first question posted was from Anesu, and the question was: third-party security is the weakest point. How to effectively ensure that they are secure? For example, what happened with the CrowdStrike incident? Yeah.
Okay. Interesting question. So, you know what? I'm gonna turn this one on its head a little bit, and I've for years we've talked about the human firewall, the human factor. The bad guys attack people. We see this repeatedly, whether a person is socially engineered, whether an individual is phished, whether an individual doesn't patch their systems in time, whether the engineer at CrowdStrike pushed out a patch which wasn't meant to be service affecting. So I'm actually going to say that people are the weakest link. Now, unfortunately, if you're a fairly mature, if you're in an organization, and I think most people on this call, this time late on a Wednesday afternoon, you guys are taking cybersecurity seriously. So I'll hazard a guess that your organizations you're with take cybersecurity relatively seriously. The problem comes in is when you have a third party, you've got no idea how seriously they're taking it. So I definitely agree with the point that I can control my environment and my culture and my risk. It's very difficult to manage the risk within my third parties. And that's exactly what I mentioned earlier about third-party risk management. In working on a collaborative approach with your vendors. So rather than shaking a stick at your vendor and saying, look, I'm going to beat you with a stick if you don't comply to my 300 questions, get proactive with your vendors. Say to your vendors, I take cybersecurity seriously. Demonstrate to me your mature approach. Tell me how you are taking cybersecurity seriously. Show me, don't show me, 300 questions. Show me evidentiary evidence that you have got the fundamentals in place to mitigate risk. As I mentioned before, we utilize a tool, we resell a tool called Black Kite. Black Kite, if you take a license for Black Kite and you monitor your vendors, you can give your vendors access to Black Kite. And that works as a carrot to encourage your vendors, your third parties, to take a proactive stance. Now, the CrowdStrike incident is a particularly tricky incident. That was more an availability issue rather than a breach or an incident, a breach of sensitive information. So that one is particularly difficult to protect against. Having said that, if I had a vendor that was such a critical part of my infrastructure, I would really want to ensure that my contracts with that vendor suitably protect myself. And we've just talked about cyber insurance. I'd really want to make sure that my cyber insurance covers my critical vendors, that if they suffer an incident, or more importantly, I want to make sure that CrowdStrike have got suitable insurance, that if they suffer an issue, that it protects me as well, or there's some level of compensation involved. So the CrowdStrike issue is it's a huge one, super interesting. Hopefully that sheds some light on it.
Thank you, Andrew. We've got two further questions. One from our very own Brian Baxter, who we already know and love and is a SIGCyber committee member. So Brian asks, and you touched on this earlier, have you seen any cyber insurers repudiate claims because customers didn't have the basics in place?
Yeah, Brian, great question. So in all honesty, no. But that's a heavily caveated no yet. So in most of the cases, the organizations we've gone into have had a good, solid foundation around cybersecurity, where they have cyber insurance in place. And I think, cyber insurance is a bit self-serving. It's we all know, we've all got, car insurance if you've got a car. And I know I've heard stories where, if my tracker is not working, or if I don't install the tracker and, it's non-functional on the day of my accident, there's a very strong likelihood my claim is going to be repudiated. And what we've found with all of the cyber insurance claims we've worked on, the base level of cyber maturity has actually been pretty good. Yes, there's been an incident, but there's only been one or two access vectors that led to the breach. The overall cybersecurity maturity has actually been fairly decent. We haven't yet had a claim where it was atrocious. I'm sure we will get a claim where it's atrocious, and I think then it's going to be at the decision of the cyber insurer. There's going to be a number of factors that they will take into account, whether they truly do repudiate a claim. And what's been interesting for us working with a number of cyber insurers, generally insurers don't want to not pay. If the word gets out that my insurance is not worth the paper it's written on because they never pay a claim, people are going to cancel their policies. So, I think the cyber insurance industry is in a good place. If you have a decent level of cybersecurity and you're following the 10 commandments that your cyber insurer has provided to you, has stipulated to you, you're in a very strong position that your claim will not be repudiated. Yet is the big caveat there, because we don't know what will happen in the future.
Thanks, Andrew. We've overrun lots of interesting debate, and we've got a question from Tawanda. We've got several questions from Tawanda actually, but only time. So I'm going to take Tawanda's first question. So on compromise access vectors, i.e. Teams, Viewer, OneDesk, etc., can you please comment on the use of these as they go through firewalls easily? And it's a great question. You touched on email earlier.
Yeah. So yeah, let's be very clear. So we always talk about, well, in fact, it was one of my comments about access vectors, you know, the unknown unknowns. So the last thing you want in your environment is someone unexpectedly or unknowingly to you firing up TeamViewer or OneDesk without IT knowing about it. TeamViewer, OneDesk, and all that kind of good stuff can be used securely if you know about it and you protect it. And if I'm not mistaken, most of those, you can actually use multi-factor authentication now to kind of utilize them effectively. Now, the good thing is they are very good at getting through the firewall, but most of the modern day firewalls are very good at blocking that kind of traffic. And, you know, in the old days, most organizations would, you know, allow all traffic outbound unrestricted to the internet, which is why these would work trivially within any environment. But if you're running a tight shop, you should be running through a proxy, or at least all of your traffic should be filtered through a firewall that's application aware. And you can definitely block, you know, these systems unless it's an authorized service provisioned by your IT department. And then the big caveat, as I said before, is making sure that those services have something like two-factor authentication enabled to, you know, facilitate them being used in a secure fashion.
Yes, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Prof. KL. Thank you, Kelvin, in the background there, and thank you to our participants for taking time out this evening to join us. We did overrun. We could go on for hours. It's a massive topic. So thank you all, and I look forward to the next webinar. We've got lots to talk about, and I think next time we'll be touching on the topic of how AI is influencing cybersecurity, both from an attack and a prevention point of view. Good evening, everybody.
Right. So,
thank you.
Okay. So, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Prof. And please go to the IITPSA website, look at the events page, and see what's coming next. Thank you very much to everybody, and good night.